So it's time to give you a roundup of the Acer Aspire V5 122P, which I've had for a couple of weeks. This is an Ultrabook alternative. It's not an Ultrabook. It runs on the AMD A6 1450 Tamash platform, and in fact this launched a couple of weeks before AMD launched Tamash. So we got some early look in and some performance tests on this platform. But before I talk about that, let's just go around the device. So it weighs about 1.4 kilos. It is AMD Tamash 1450 quad core up to 1.4 gigahertz. There's a question about whether it does get to 1.4 gigahertz. Some people that have tested this haven't got to 1.4 gigahertz, but although I admit there might be a problem in getting there after a couple of reboots or standby cycles, it does release itself into full power mode. It's independent of whether you set it to high power, battery saving, or balance mode in the power performance settings. So there's a clear little bug there, but after reboots or recycling into standby mode, it does get there. So 1.4 gigahertz is possible. The platform itself, in terms of performance, has about the performance clock for clock as an Ultrabook. So if you think back to Sandy Bridge i3, the early ones at 1.5 gigahertz, that's the sort of CPU performance level we're getting now. The new Ultrabooks run at least 1.8 gigahertz and turbo higher. So the actual performance, the absolute performance is greater, but clock for clock, this is about the same performance. So in terms of graphics, the Radeon graphics in here is again something between an HD 3000 and HD 4000. So Ultrabook class graphics performance at this clock in a slightly lower power profile. So you can actually run games that you'd run on an Ultrabook on here in a more efficient manner. So the question is though, have you got the battery life to support that? This thing only has a 30 watt hour, I think a 32 watt hour, 34 watt hour, a small battery in it. So you're only looking at 3 to 4 hours of usability anyway. So it's pretty academic, the fact that it's more efficient. So it's a 1366 by 768, a touchscreen. It's an IPS. It's a nice screen. It's not full, 180 degree viewing angles, but it's actually really quite nice. It's punchy and it's responsive in the touch. I think it's 10-finger touch. Most of you will only be using 5 fingers though, so that's probably not relevant. Nice touchscreen and good brightness. This is not super bright. It's not for outdoor uses, but it's pretty good. Keyboard, actually pretty nice. Pretty surprised about that. I thought this keyboard might be a little bit lower quality than a lot of the Ultrabooks I've tried, but it's actually slightly better than a lot of the Ultrabooks I've tried, especially when you think about devices like the Toshiba Z830, Z930, which had a very small key layout and a very low throw on the keys. It doesn't come up anywhere near something like the Dell 6430U or the Lenovo X1 Carbon, but for an hour or two, pretty good. So better than something like the Sony Vaio Duo 11, for example, which has a very tight, cramped keyboard, and it's backlit as well. So actually quite nice to use. Touchpad, okay. Responsiveness pretty good. Clicky on the touch though. So if you're going to use it as a desktop, you probably want to plug in a mouse. 4 gigs of RAM in here, 500 gig hard drive. There's no hybrid SSD support, but what I will say is that upgrading it is a piece of cake. The back comes off very easily. You can upgrade the RAM, the network card, and the hard drive is a 2.5-inch 7mm drive. I've already dropped in a My Digital SSD BP4, 240 gigs. It really flies. So actually really worth thinking about getting this. Take the 500 gig out, put it in a SATA enclosure, use it as an external drive and put a SATA in here. 128 gigs is not going to cost you too much. Speakers are pretty good on this, really not bad at all. And also on the back here, let me close in, there is a battery extension connector and 2 screw holes here. We don't know how big the battery extension is, we haven't seen pictures of it yet, and Acer Germany don't know anything about it yet. So at some point in the future there's going to be a battery extension to this. We assume it's going to be at least the same capacity of what's inside, but I suspect maybe a little bit more, 40, 45 watt hours, which would bring this up to 75 watt hours, 80 watt hours, and make it quite interesting. 1.6, 1.7 kilo with 7 or 8 hours duration would be quite interesting, especially for the price. Ports though, I think there's an interesting thing to mention on the ports, so I'll just go around. Full SD card slots there, and there's the USB 3. Now I'll come back to this one in a minute. It looks like a mini display port. On the other side we've got power button, headset port, another USB and the DC. There's nothing else around it, not on the front. But coming back to this, this is actually, although Acer don't seem to be marketing it as such, it is the AMD lightning bolt connector, which has a combined display port and USB 3 on the same connector, and the connector is the same as a mini display port, and I can prove that right now by just plugging in a standard mini display port cable to a full HD monitor that I've got here. We'll just turn that on and show you that it actually works on the monitor. So that's quite interesting because you've got just easy access to screen output there of the highest quality. So mini display port obviously goes up above 1080p. Let's just bring that browser window up here so you can see. There you go. I've got 2 screens working here as an extended display. So as I mentioned, battery life around the 3 to 4 hours mark. You won't get much more out of this. Performance is sub 2013 Ultrabook, and as Haswell Ultrabooks come out, this is going to be quite a step below Ultrabooks, but it sits, I think, in a very nice area of the market, and that is potentially where the new sort of class of netbooks come in. That's low cost touch Windows 8 devices, sub notebooks you could call them, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 kilos, what's that, £3, and a very interesting price point, €450 in Europe. That's inclusive of 19% tax, so that's equivalent I think to about $450 in the States, although having said that, it's selling for about $550 in the States on pre-order. That's recommended retail price. I guarantee that price will come down below $499 within weeks of it launching, as soon as retailers start competing against each other for sales, because I think this could be a good seller. The competitor to this one, not the brother, the cousin I guess, is the Asus VivoBook X202, which is the #2 notebook on Amazon.com. Number 2 notebook, not just touch notebook, not Windows 8, not Ultrabook, the #2 notebook. And the only one that beats it is the Chromebook. The price of that at the moment is a very good €465, I think. So expect this to come down and compete. I can't imagine that Acer will let Acers beat them on price in this price category. Acer are in now for really putting the thumb down on prices. So overall, I think this is a very good value sub notebook, Ultrabook alternative. Can be used as a desktop. It is ultra mobile. Has an interesting expansion capability, upgrade capability as well. Speakers are good. I really like that mini display port option, and there will be a docking station coming for this, so you can imagine you basically have a 2 connection desktop, which makes it very, very useful. Keyboard is great. Backlight is something fairly unique in this price category, and even the touchpad is okay. It's not top quality. As a desktop, you want to plug in a mouse. Noise and heat. Can get noisy if you let it run at 1.4 gigahertz all the time. You'll hear the fan kick in, but if you can handle having it running at 1 gigahertz, you're fairly careful about how much you leave running on the screen. It will be almost fanless, so the fan will run right down and it'll be almost noiseless. So heat, not too bad at all. Actually, I think there's scope for turning that fan down a bit, judging by the heat or the lack of heat that I see coming out of here. There'll be a full review of this on Ultrabook News, including a whole load of performance tests I've already done on it, which you'll find on umpcportal.com. If you search for AMD TMASH performance tests, you'll find them on umpcportal.com. You'll see gaming tests, CPU tests, GPU tests, SunSpider, for example, 450 milliseconds, very competitive in compared to Ultrabooks in terms of graphics as well, and compared to netbooks, this is in a completely different category, and yet in, I think, a price group that makes it extremely interesting, really sort of the follow-on from the netbook, and I'm sure there'll be more competitors in this space as we move along. That's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video if you found this useful. Acer Aspire V5122P is the model number, and the full review will be coming up on Ultrabook News very soon. Thanks for watching.